and released to the public these previously withheld Dead Sea Scrolls that the team, the official team that has control of the Dead Sea Scrolls to this day, weren't at all pleased, and in fact engaged in lawsuits to try to prevent it?
That isn't true.
Okay, who did the lawsuit that you're referring to?
It's ongoing, so I really don't want to talk about that. The lawsuit is still going on, but the law school suit was directed by these people are extremely sensitive. There are libel suits that are possible. There are all kinds of things like that. So one has to be extremely careful about how one expresses oneself in things where there are very touchy, trigger-happy, legal-minded people ready to jump at the least thing. So you have to excuse me if I don't jump to general expressions. I have to be very, very precise.
I think you've been very courageous.
The person, I have to be very careful. You just can't jump off the plug on these things, because the least thing you say, they're waiting to trip you up. And you can't be imprecise either. One of my colleagues who worked with me on the Dead Sea Scrolls Uncovered found that out to his chagrin, that you can't be imprecise. My colleague had a lot of troubles in that regard. But the point was that there was a scholar, a disgruntled scholar in Israel, who sued the publisher of this facsimile edition because of something he saw in the publisher's foreword. It had nothing to do with the publication of the plates as such, not the suit that is going on. So no, nobody sued over that, though there may have been a motive of that kind in someone's mind somewhere. But that scholar denies that was his motive. He was just worried about his work appearing in not our book. He didn't ever publish over the publication of the pictures over something in the publisher's foreword. But I'd like to get away from this subject. This is a minefield.
Yes.
And the people, and also the people who are responsible for giving the pictures, have not yet been identified. And a lot of people like to know who they are, and I haven't revealed that.
And the fact is that nowadays a scholar such as yourself, who takes the courageous action that you did for the benefit of the public,
if I did, I hope I did. Yeah. That was my motive. Some people would think it was otherwise, but I think, as far as I'm aware, that was my motive.
Yeah, and it certainly did benefit the public, because we now can read Dead Sea Scrolls that we couldn't read before. But
and there's no academic mafia or no academic monopoly that can tell you what these things mean without you looking at it yourself and deciding whether you agree with that.
We can read it ourselves.
Right,
we just have to study Hebrew first.
Right. Well, you can still look up points.
But nevertheless, 1,500 years ago, a scholar like yourself would have to watch out, or he could actually get tied to a stake.
Oh, you get burned. Yes, a lot of people were burned over these issues, terribly.
And nowadays, it's more that you have to watch out for lawsuits and everything.
Let me tell you something, David, on that point.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't even blanch about the burnings that occurred of good, decent people for a 500-year period, from about 1,000 to about 16. People were still being burned in 1600s anyway. I'm reading recently about English martyrs who were burned. Their hands were actually still quivering in the fires as they were dying, and things like this, just for saying the smallest thing about their beliefs. And then these people who are responsible for that kind of activity don't even blanch with apologies today for often, in fact, trying to limit free speech at the present time. And other people support that activity, and we still haven't heard an apology for all these horrendous things that were done over the last 600, 700 years, and the terrible suffering that people went through. Can you imagine what it was like to be burned because you thought something? I mean, how atrocious that could be.
Well, those who are regular viewers of this TV show can vouch for the fact that 1,500 years ago, I'd have been one of the first guys tied to the stake. So nowadays, I'm lucky, because all that happens is I get a few angry letters from fundamentalists and such. But before totally leaving this topic, I do want to alert the viewers to the book that followed the facsimile edition, a book by yourself and Michael Wise called The Dead Sea Scrolls Uncovered. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that the primary difference between this book and the facsimile edition that we were looking at is that the facsimile edition was simply photographs of the scrolls themselves, so that anybody that wanted to look at them, study them, and interpret interpret them for themselves could do so. This book, The Dead Sea Scrolls Uncovered, you actually, along with Dr. Wise, translate them and provide interpretation.
Well, the rationale behind that book was, look, we said, look, we've got these pictures, we're making them all public, we're not trying to make any academic capital out of them, but we had the thrill of seeing our translation and our interpretation. If you open that up, you'll see actually there's Hebrew text in there. Now, no previous Dead Sea Scroll compilation, no, actually Hebrew transcriptions, if you look further along in this volume, you'll see that we would give a Hebrew transcription, and then we would give a translation, and then we would give an interpretation. No previous volume ever thought the public was worthy of seeing the actual Hebrew text so that they could take the actual translation and go and see if we were lying to them. No previous volume, and now a lot of them do it. But previously, no one ever put the Hebrew on for the general public. For scholars, yes, but not for the general public. Now, as you see, the Israeli government likes to follow in the tracks of others. They're doing that in their official things, but no one did that before. So that was the benefit of that book. But the rationale behind that book was, we said, look, we never got a chance to get a book out there first. So we picked what we consider the 50 most interesting, there are a lot of interesting materials, from the previously unpublished corpus and rushed out there with this volume. So for the first time, the public was treated to an opposition point of view in terms of interpretation of the Dead Sea Scrolls. And a lot of people's reaction to that was electric, because for always they'd had the establishment theorizing about these scrolls. And you see, that proves the theory that I put out here before. Control of the unpublished manuscripts meant control of the field. If you could get out there first with your interpretation, rather than the establishment getting its interpretation out there, people were going to listen to you and take you seriously, and that's what they've done. That book has been taken extremely seriously by a lot of people.
Well, Dr. Eisenman, as I read this book, I was struck by the language, how profoundly Christian some of the language is in the Dead Sea Scrolls. As a matter of fact, on the back cover of the book we read here, the authors speak of a Messiah and the resurrection of the dead. They allude not only to doctrines we now recognize as Christian, but also, and it goes on and on. But when I read this book, I said to myself, no wonder these scrolls have been withheld for over 40 years. There's some interesting material in here. They tried to say that this was not significant stuff, but it struck me as extremely significant.
Well, again, you're giving the editorial committee too much credit. I'm not sure the editorial committee ever understood that this was very Christian stuff. So I'm not sure that was the reason behind the withholding, or so-called withholding. I'm not sure they even withheld it.